All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Implausible Nature. Caffeine Crusade. Today we are talking about assassins and allies. I've seen a lot of lists with allies lately. Um, and so we're going to talk about do we really need allies in a Black Templars list? The answer is no. Okay. Have a great day. We'll see you next time. No, I'm just kidding. um, So, um, so in 10th, there's a very short list of allies we can take. It's basically anything from the Agents of Imperium index and Knights. And that's it. No Guard, no Sisters, no other Imperium, no Votan. I don't know why we could take those as allies in 9th edition. That was the weirdest thing ever. But um, but yeah, so we're gonna talk a little bit about that. Probably touch on the state of the game and see where it takes us. What are your initial thoughts, Bob?
Competitively, if you're looking at tournament lists, I have not seen very many lists without allies. Do I think we need them? No, I don't think we need them. But they give us a slight edge in some matchups that are otherwise fairly difficult, um, by either giving us some cheap objective holders or the ability to deny stratagem use.
Hmm.
Uh, Specifically like Necrons or Custodes, with the Calidus assassin.
Yep.
So, and by denying their stratagem use, they can still use it, but it costs them one additional CP, which over the course of the game will prevent them from using it more than
Yeah.
they want. So that's especially crippling to Necrons who want to use that stratagem multiple times,
Right.
multiple. Times. So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely. Um,
so that's one of the more common.
we've seen um, a lot of Vindicators as well. People running Vindicare assassins. Um,
I'm serving after refresher video.
what's that?
We just went dark. Not
Um,
even.
that's weird.
We're back up.
Okay. Um,
Yeah, Vindicares are very popular.
hmm Yeah, I
So,
honestly haven't uh, looked much at allies. Mainly because I'm kind of a purist. I generally prefer to run pure Black Templars, but I certainly understand their usefulness as far as a competitive aspect goes. But so I really haven't looked too much at them. So this will be interesting for me because I really haven't looked too much at the assassins or the other agents of the Imperium. I know about knights, just from playing against them. One of my friends has knights. Um, so Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think uh, I think the Vindicare definitely looks interesting. Um, he's got that really nasty sniper gun, especially when you consider that we don't now really, aside from eliminators, have any snipers. Um, and the part of the reason for that, it's not that we don't. I mean, we have scout snipers, technically speaking, but the issue is that GW just retired their kit, which means they're probably going Legends unless we get a new kit in the Codex when the Codex drops. So we've kind of stopped talking about scouts in general just because of that. Uh, I've stopped looking at them to take in my list. Um, and it's unfortunate too because I've had these sniper scout squad that I've had sitting in a box for ages. They're primed, and they've I've been waiting for the time when they would be useful, and it was now, and then suddenly it was not.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Anything that was on that list, I kind of taken out of my list.
yeah, which is unfortunate because I have a really nicely painted land speeder that was gonna go great with my Vindicator. And now it's kind of. Shane says Tech Marine plus Witchseeker bolts makes a wonderful sniper of characters. Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's pretty nice to put that on his Forge bolter, which definitely is neat. Um, but it's not the kind of the same damage output that the Vindicator is, because his gun is strength 7. You can use it to it's AP 3. It's D3 plus 3 damage. It becomes D3 plus 6 damage when a crit hit is scored, which is nuts. And you can make him ignore invuls for a turn, which is pretty cool. So, but for 10 points, if you're taking a Tech Marine anyway, it's not bad. It's not a
Yeah.
bad source of precision. Um, I guess it really just kind of depends on what your list needs, right? Um, but looking at the Vindicare, he's pretty interesting. Um, now, uh, I don't know that I would, if I even had the model, which I don't, uh, run the Warhammer Plus one, because it's like this huge thing, and the whole thing counts as the model, so I don't think we really want to be running that thing. Um, but I think they do make another model, right?
Yeah. I mean, they do have the other model. The one thing I would say, like the saving grace with the Vidicare is with that model is it's a lone operative
Yeah,
um, with stealth. So, I mean, depending on how you position it, you may not even get shot at anyway.
right. That's true.
So, and the model is fairly big, like you're looking like a ton size. So it's like it's fairly big. Um, I
It's
wouldn't use it. I
cool.
have the model. It is a very cool model, but I mean, at least you're always going to get line of sight on stuff,
It's true,
I
because you're so tall.
guess.
You're so tall.
You are your own terrain.
Yeah, yeah,
but
exactly.
but I mean, it's a great model. It's a great piece. The downside, I would say, with allies, and while it is a scary piece, it will pick off characters, and that's critically important for a lot of matchups. Actually, if they don't have their characters, they're gonna go die in a hole. So that's why a lot of people are taking things like Inceptors in their list to go address this
Yep.
issue. But I think we've kind of slipped away from the Vindicare a little bit. Um, while there's still some people that are still using them and some lists, obviously, but I think we've slipped towards the Calidus a little bit. And the reason why I think that is not for its killing ability. I mentioned earlier Reign of Confusion, which is the
Hmm.
suppression of CP, but it's more for its ability to use polymorphine, which allows it to jump back into reserves and then
Yeah,
come back anywhere else, so that it is an action monkey for you.
yeah,
So it could deep strike. It has fights first, infiltrators, and lone operative, which is massive. So it can infiltrate wherever you need to, do an action, jump back into deep strike or into reserves, and jump back someplace around the board. Oftentimes it's going to be on your opponent's side of the board. Do the actions there, jump back in. You know, so it's very, very, very useful.
yeah,
The problem is 115 points, so you have to really build to put it in the
yeah,
list.
yeah. The Vindicator is definitely like a one-trick pony. His job is to kill characters, and after that, He doesn't, he's got a mediocre strength weapon to shoot at
Yeah.
something. Um, versus the Calidus is definitely much more utility because not only can you nerf one of their most used strats, you can, like you said, jump around, be an action monkey, that kind of thing. So, um, yeah, I can definitely see the Calidus being more useful. Um, but still, like you said, 115 points. That's a lot to spend on a single character action monkey. So you got to kind of weigh the pros and cons and either plan to take one. I don't think it's a unit that you're just going to be like, oh, I'll just throw this in here kind of thing. You're gonna plan to take one if you're gonna take one. Rogue says,
Yeah.
I use a Vindicare often, and it makes for great backfield objective holding and that obvious precision shot. So yeah, I mean, there's no, he's not bad. A lot of people are taking him. Um, so um, so yeah, it's certainly an interesting choice depending on which way you want to go. Shane asks, Calidus Reign of Confusion can be done while it's in reserves, right? Given the rules, commentary on the abilities in reserves. Yes. Um, just can't be used in a transport, which I don't know if they can even ride in a transport. I know some of I think the Inquisitors can ride in a transport with our stuff, with our battle line. Um, but yeah, it can definitely be used in reserves, so which is pretty cool. So you can pop them in reserves and uh, do that ability if you need to. So, what what about some of these other units? There's a bunch of other stuff in this Agents of the Imperium thing. Anything sticking out to you, Bob, as a unit worth looking at?
Well, there's the obvious one that a lot of people have already covered. Uh, the Extraction Squad.
Yeah, Exaction,
Yeah,
Exaction Squad.
they're 35 points. So oftentimes people are using those as just like action monkeys on your side of the board.
Hmm.
I mean, 35 points for battle line is, or I'm sorry, they're not battle line.
They're not battle line.
35 points for units that,
I can just kind of sit around and do stuff.
yeah. I mean, and they're decent for 35 points. I mean,
Yeah, they've
you
got a
can't
feel
complain.
no pain,
Yeah.
or they can get a feel
So
no pain.
you're not gonna uh, find this box probably
Yeah, exactly.
anywhere.
Good luck.
So they're the Gladiator Lancer of the world right now. So
Yep.
yeah, if you're running low on like action monkeys or something to sit on your objective, these are a great place to go. Um, a lot of times people have just weird points that they're sitting at just because of the nature of list building now.
Yep.
And 35 points is oftentimes very easy to fit in after you've got all your other units in.
Yeah.
So you can use up some of that extra overflow points. So give you another unit. I mean, they don't do too terribly much as far as offensive power. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, you're not taking them for their killing ability, for sure. You're literally just taking them because they're cheap action monkeys with a feel no pain. That makes them semi decent. Rogue Flight says Rogue Trader Entourage for the redeploy. Which, if you're not familiar, warrant of trade. If your army includes one or more units with this ability, after players have deployed, select D3 Imperium Battle Line units from your army and redeploy them. You can use this ability to place those selected units into strategic reserves, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves. And then you roll off if you both have that ability. They have a 4-up invul, which is pretty nice. Um, so I don't even know what else they're equipped with. Oh, they're essentially like a leader. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Which means they can
it's a
be,
theme.
yeah, they can be attached to voidsmen and breachers. Um, so um, so yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting. Honestly, again, you're gonna have to build around them for that because uh, it's only battle line units, right? So this is something to consider if you're taking a bunch of like 3 to 4 Crusader squads. Um, where you want to, and it's D3. That's the other big issue. Um, it's so it's not bad. I just feel like I don't know. You can you lose if you do that. You're losing out on um, scout for your PCS squads. The other thing for me to consider is like honestly like with I'm not putting necessarily a ton of stuff in strategic reserves. Like I'd probably put a 20 man Crusader squad in there. Um, and I think that still gives you, I'd have to do the math. I think that still gives you the ability to put like an intercessor squad in there too. So it really just kind of depends. Um,
Yeah, that's 105 points too, so it basically
mhm,
costs the cost of a character.
yeah.
So I think the going trend right now, at least, is sheer utility, which assassins give us,
Hmm.
or cheap action monkeys.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they're what we're seeing. Now, it doesn't mean that the these units aren't useful,
Right.
um, which is not necessarily the case at all. And we'll kind of go through a bunch of them. That's kind of like the guideline of what the meta is kind of seeing is cheap or extremely useful at sea, which assassins do.
Yeah.
And of course, then we'll get into knights too. They do. See, they're pretty firepower. Another one that kind of really stood out to me, and no one's really talking about, is the battle line unit, the Voidsmen at Arms.
Yeah.
So they're 40 points. You get 5 guys, um, but they're OC2. So
Yeah.
these guys are fairly legit. You can have them sit on your home objective if you want. I have experimented with them because I
Yeah.
play them in kill team, but they're kind of nice at throwing them in strategic reserves because they're 40 points. They don't take too much of my 500 points.
Yep.
And then I just kind of walk them onto the board and get them to an objective. So, and because they're OC2, which if we're not taking Crusader squads, we're probably not taking too terribly many battle line units
Right.
nowadays. So we don't have any of those really high value objective guys, and they're just holding an objective. They're small models, so they're easy to be hidden.
Yep. You can tuck them behind some terrain or something.
And I mean, they're basically las guns. They are las guns, but they do have the rotary cannon, which can put out some damage
Yeah.
accidentally, and it can do lethal hits. So if it's the closest,
Yeah.
so
Which if they're shooting, they're probably shooting the closest
yeah,
because they don't want to. They don't really want to be in the thick of it. Um, Edmund asks, in Shooty 10th edition, is bolt rifles worth it in Crusader squads? I don't think so. Not en masse. Take one, so you can do actions if you advance. Actions. Um, excuse me.
yeah,
But yeah,
and
I don't think they're worth it. If you want a bunch of bolt rifles, take either Stern Guard or Intercessors. Um, and yeah, Crusaders are cheaper, but you're not getting as many bolt rifles. Number one, you're also, you're gonna have the neophyte firearms, which are mediocre at best. They're basically what 18-inch bolters um, that are assault. The The other thing, or I mean, if you want to, like I said, take one, either neophyte firearm or a what you call it, uh, uh, bolt rifle, just to get that assault keyword on there, so that they're eligible to shoot if they advance. If you're not familiar what that means, why that's important is um, a lot of, not a lot, but several of the secondaries require that when um, you can do a thing to score points if you're eligible to shoot. So by giving them one assault weapon in the squad, that makes them eligible to shoot even if they advance.
Yep.
Um, so otherwise, they're not eligible to shoot. Uh, so um, so yeah, so that's why you would consider taking just one. But like I said, if you want, bolt rifles, like a lot of bolt rifles, intercessors are better because they can take a grenade launcher in addition. They have sticky objectives, or Stern Guard are just straight up better than both because their bolters are amazing. They're rapid fire one with two shots. They're heavy, devastating wounds, um, and they get a heavy bolter in there with devastating wounds as well. So Stern Guard are definitely the go-to if you want anti-infantry bolt rifles, and they can take combi weapons if you prefer combi weapons. So um,
Yeah, and
so
even
no,
the heavy intercessors are reasonable now. I don't
yeah,
take them simply just because they don't fit my style, but they're reasonably priced now. They do
mm,
a good chunk of damage now, so and they're durable.
yeah,
I just don't take them.
yeah. Edmund also says the Voidsman would make great chapter serfs. I agree. That would be
Yes.
a cool way to, maybe even utilize like the old scout models or something like that because they're so tiny. Um, could be something like that.
Yeah, that's I take my. I don't know if you guys have watched the Warhammer Plus, the Blood Angel show. I forget the name of it, but that's what I'm kind of modeling my Voidsman as, is that except Black Templar.
Right.
So um, it's kind of a cool little way of looking at it. I'm
Hmm.
thinking, I was like, hey, this is my battle cruiser crew.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, B. Dakin says he takes five in a 20 man and pulls them first as they close in the melee because you'll rarely get all 20 in a melee. Yeah, um, I can see that. You're going to take some casualties in a large squad. Um, really just kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. I 20 man, I probably put in strategic reserves with this meta with the way Blast is, because if you're taking a 20 man, you're taking Grimaldus, um, because there's no reason not to. Helbrecht is okay with them, but Grimaldus is really where it's at in my opinion on a 20 man, and so that makes them 24. So I'm probably going to put them in strategic reserves because otherwise, stuff like Desolation Marines are going to, and Knights with all their blast weapons are going to really hurt that squad. Maybe even before Grimaldus can put his Feel No Pain on there. So you put them in strategic reserves. They have reroll charges, so when they come in, you've got about a 50-50 chance of making a charge. Grimaldus can use his ability in reserves, so you can give them the Feel No Pain. So when they come in, if they fail the uh, fail the charge, then at least they've got that Feel No Pain active. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's just one way to making sure that they're available and don't get killed too much. Yeah, unfortunately, you're probably gonna, depends on how you got your list set up and what's in your list, obviously. But,
Yeah,
sometimes strategic reserve is the way to go. Sometimes it's better to draw attention to them.
yeah.
What you kind of want to do as a threat, depending. Um, it just it really depends on how you
Depends on the
list.
terrain too. And if you can hide
Yeah,
them in a piece of behind ruins or something, that can help you out a lot. Frank asks, can you use command phase abilities for reserve units? If that, as long as there's no range attached to it, like a unit within 6 inches, obviously you can't do that on a reserve unit, even if that unit is in reserves. But yeah, like, Grimaldus's ability is a command phase unit. He can use it on the unit that he's in with reserves with. The only exception to this is you can't do it on somebody in a transport. So you can't use um, what's a fervent acclamation on something in a transport, but you can use it on something in reserves. This was specifically clarified in the commentary, which is great because um, it makes being able to do that pretty nice for both of those. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we kind of talked about some of the highlights as far as the allies go, but we haven't talked about somewhat of a controversial subset of units, the Inquisitors.
yes, the filthy witches. They
Yes,
were
the vast majority of them deserve
the hot take in ninth edition for a good while there because of uh, their ability to give us some CP back, that kind of stuff. There's several named Inquisitors here too. What's your take on Inquisitors, Bob?
I think they give us something valuable if you want to take them as kind of a combo piece based on either what you are seeing in your meta, because they a lot of times have specializations, um, either Xenos or
Hmm.
demons, that type of thing. Um, but would I go out of my way to take them in a tournament list? Probably not. And the reason is because of that specialization. So if they were good against uh, the name characters, at least good against everything, then I would be like, oh yeah, it'd be great. But they do have some really cool things that they can do. Now, if you look over their data sheets, you can kind of see some of the things. Like, I'll just pick one out: Inquisitor Codiez, the Spy Network. So each time your opponent gains a CP as a result of an ability, roll 1d6 and a 2+, you also get a CP. So I mean that's a cool ability, right?
Yep.
Get CP when your opponent gets it,
Yep.
and
Pretty
it's
reliably.
fairly reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's things that you can do, and lore wise, the Black Templars would at least stomach the Zerker abilities of an Inquisitor. We've seen this in the
Yeah.
lore
They
with
wouldn't
Grey
be happy
Fax.
about it. But uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think Greyfax is pretty interesting for Templars. Um, the Cyoculum. While this model is leading a unit, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Anti-Psyker 4+ ability. Um, so that's pretty interesting because um, something like Stern Guard with devastating wounds, and if you're going up against uh, you know Grey Knights or anybody with a lot of psychers, now you're just causing dev wounds on a 4-up, which is pretty mean. Um, so um, so yeah, they can be attached to, although she can't be attached to Stern Guard, unfortunately, which I just read. She can be attached to Battle Line Infantry. So unfortunately, that combo just went out the window before it even began.
Yeah, it's going to be like Crusader squads and such,
Yeah,
which is what makes uh, the regular Inquisitor, like, I think the best
yeah,
one.
just the basic
Yeah, the
Inquisitor.
basic one. And the reason why is you have a combination, a little bit of like all of the named ones. They're just not as good, but that's okay. So, in my opinion, the range of abilities is the best. So, so obviously, It's not going to be as expensive. It's 55 points. You still have to go with a battle line, so that's going to be one of your troops,
Hmm.
which is fine. It can go in a transport if you want to do it that way. Um, their their weaponry is eh,
It's
but
whatever.
you have the psychic power.
Hmm.
Don't smite me. So and then we have the melee weapons, which is are decent if you use the force weapon. But the big thing that you get here is going to be the power of the Rosette. Same thing as Codiez, except it's on a 3+. You get the
Well, and it's
CP.
it's actually when you target this model's unit with a strat.
Oh yeah, you're right.
So every time you spend CP on that unit, you can potentially get it back on pretty reliably still,
Yeah.
which is nice.
So there's that. But the other thing is that is kind of important, especially in some matchups, is the ability to get the 5+, feel no pain against mortal wounds.
Hmm.
So typically we have to use chaplain for this, um, but a Terminator chaplain specifically,
Yep.
and this is a way to give it to like a Crusader squad. Maybe you have a larger Crusader squad. Maybe you have the 10 mans or what have you. This would be a way to give them, or maybe you're using something else better. It's a nice way to get that
Yeah.
feel no pain against mortal wounds,
Yeah.
and they're cheap at 55 points. So I kind of like what they can do there as far as that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not bad. You know, I there's like I think it's one of those things where you could take it or leave it. Like it's not so good that you would necessarily always take it over another character for like a
Mhm.
Crusader squad, like a um, what do you call it, a Primaris Company champ, or even the Emperor's champ, or Helbrecht, or something like that. Um, or even a Castellan. Um, but it's also, you know, has some benefits to it that some of those other ones don't. So I think the generic Inquisitor is fine. It's like I said, I feel like it's a take it or leave it. It's not a must-have, but it's an interesting choice, at least. You know.
Jared asks, what about the generic Inquisitor on the Voidson? I mean, that would be a good combo. It'll up their durability a little bit with that
Yeah.
mortal wound protection. But I would say that you're going to waste the power of the Rosette because you're not using the strategic or stratagems on that unit.
Right.
So you'll kind of waste that a little bit. Um, Inquisitorial henchmen are a little bit noteworthy as far as they give you some access to some cooler weapons,
Yeah.
but they're kind of expensive.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't. They're 40 points, but uh, the more you take, the more expensive they get.
Yep.
So there's that. I guess I wouldn't take them for the models, honestly. We can do that better in
Yeah.
our lists.
Yeah. If you want servitor guns, just take servitors with a tech marine. So, you know, and get them to hit on twos if they stand still, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
So,
So we've kind of talked about the Imperium side, and really we kind of glazed over the Selexis Assassin and Eviscer, simply because they're not quite as useful as the other two, at least as it
mhm,
currently stands.
yeah.
Especially for a Righteous Crusader, because uh, the detachment, so we can go into Abhor the Witch if we need
Hmm.
to give us some additional anti-Zerker abilities. But Vindicare and the Calidus are extremely useful for our lists in general.
Yep.
If you feel like you want to take them, some people do, some people don't. But being remaining pure, you can't complain about the utility of the Calidus. And if you're playing in a tournament, I would seriously consider taking one.
Yeah.
because it will give you a lot of play in the game. Give you some defensive against one of our very hard counters in the Custodes, because they are very stratagem reliant on defending against your rebuttal against their key units, reducing your offensive ability against their units. So that'll make it so that yeah, it'll go off, but they're probably not going to use it again. Um, or at least they're going to have to save their CP to continue to use it. So
Yeah.
that's very useful. Vindicator obviously going to be taking out characters. I mean, can't complain about that.
Yeah, exactly. Grand Enforcer asks, how many points of allies are we allowed to take? There's not actually a points limit. The Knights Codex, I'd have to go look. I think there's a certain amount of something that you can take for that Knights Codex tells you
Yeah.
what you can take. Um,
You can take one big one or three
three small ones,
armatures.
right? Yeah. Um, the um, the Agents of the Imperium, in a 2,000 point battle, you can take 2 retinue units and 2 character units, and that's it. So it's really kind of number of units. It doesn't matter how many points it is. And in fact, I've seen like joke meme lists where it's like, okay, here's my one captain, Space Marine captain, and then all the rest is allies units.
Yeah.
So, which it's a complete meme, but technically legal. Um, yeah, no true like points limits like there was in ninth, which is, I mean, nice. I guess you don't have to worry about it. You're just looking at number of.
Thing to note with Agents of the Imperium, there is no stratagems,
Uh-uh.
so you don't have to worry about that for confusion's sake. But if you go over to the Imperial Knights, which we also have access to, they do have stratagems and abilities, and we don't get them.
Yep,
So
you get nothing. All you get is the
you get
data sheet.
so
So
that's unfortunate. Now they do have some play. Now the armigers, uh, there's the Helverin and the Warglaive. So the Helverin is the one with the autocannons, and the other one is the one with the little chainsword.
mm,
Are finding themselves in some lists as well, because they do have some long range damage 3 weaponry, and they're fairly cheap. But I believe it's 155 points, something like that. So they're
yeah,
reasonably cheap. You can take 3 of them, and I mean honestly, they're AP1, so that's a disappointment.
yeah. They do have
Yeah,
a decent number of shots. Get 8 shots, I think, because they have 2 guns with 4 each.
yeah.
So we get decent number of shots. They are damage 3. So if you get some through, it's gonna hurt. Um, but honestly, I think those points are you know better spent on something else like a Lancer.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say with these is they do have a very high OC value. So, in contrast to our vehicles, which have a low OC value, these guys can actually stand on an objective and just plink away, and you don't have to worry about like a basic infantry unit walking up on to that objective and taking
Yeah,
it from you.
yeah,
So there is that. But for sheer amount of firepower, they're great.
yeah.
But the quality is much better on like a Lancer, and
I agree.
you get the ability to use stratagems
Right.
where the armatures you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing to consider is knights are built around the ability to take stratagems for them and their code chivalric and their other rules that come with them. So when you're taking them solely on the merits of the data sheet, they lose something. Um, Versus Agents of the Imperium are designed to be solely on the merits of their data sheet. So they're going to be a little bit more. Um, uh, you're not going to lose anything by taking them because they're designed to be taken only as a data sheet. There's no other rules to go with them. You can't run them as an army by
Yeah.
themselves unless you go like super meme and it's like, hey, here's my one Space Marine character and the rest is something like that. So yeah, but yeah, I think knights are okay. I personally would never take one just because the big ones are the cooler of them, and they're gonna get focused on hard. If that's your only knight, unless you have like a bunch of other like really big threats that are shooting threats, they're just going to focus on that knight. And even if you have like two or three lancers in the list, or a couple lancers, a couple of redemptors, they're still going to focus on the knight because it's the biggest, scariest model in your list. So and they're what, 400 points or something like that,
Yeah,
almost.
400 to 500.
Yeah, so that's a lot of points that's going to get immediately focused on until it's dead. And yeah, they're durable. They got a 5 up invul against ranged. They're tough 12, right?
Yeah, 3
Um,
plus 22 wounds. Not as
22
many
is
wounds as they used to have. But what?
no, but at the same time, like um, they're durable, but there's still plenty of things out there that can smoke them pretty quickly. There's anti-vehicle stuff, um, so yeah, I don't know. The big knights are cool. The little knights are more useful and less cool. And I think overall, if you're going to take allies, the Inquisition stuff is more interesting and more useful for you overall.
I th- I think they're a fluffy take as far as that goes.
Yeah,
If you're not running in like a tournament, that's
they'll
perfectly
probably be
acceptable.
fine.
I think
Yeah,
to take them because they do have something that the Space Marines don't have access to, and that is a plethora of high damage weapons.
yeah,
So that is something that we don't have access to. That these can give you. They have towering, which is still ridiculous. Um, they got their points nerfed, but
yeah,
they're still stupidly good with towering. You basically can shoot anything on the board anytime you want. So that's a thing. But as Alex mentioned, they don't have as many abilities because they're built to work around their bondsman abilities, uh,
which they
their
can't
codes.
use. Yeah,
Yeah, and they can't use them. So I mean, there is some really good ones. Like I would honestly consider possibly taking the Night Crusader. That's the shooty one
yeah.
because there's some really good guns.
That's
Let's
the
be
one with a
honest here.
Gatling, isn't it? With the big old
Yeah,
or battle
the
cannon
Avenging
or something.
Gatling gun.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's got 18 shots, 18 at 36 inches, 3 up, 6 strength, AP2, damage 2. So it's a Space Marine killer.
yeah,
That's just gonna. If it remains stationary, it also gets sustained 1. So like it's just gonna mow through Space Marines. And then you can also take the thermal cannon on it,
hmm,
which is the blast melt to 6, D6. So it's got two D3, strength 12, AP4. So that is gonna kill whatever you want to. But the problem is, as you mentioned, that's gonna be the absolute biggest threat on your board. The first right away because the guns on it are just stupidly good and every anti-vehicle weapon in your opponent's list is going to be pointed right at it.
yep,
But
yep,
I can't deny the allure of having an Imperial Knight in my list. I won't lie, since they came out, I've wanted one, and the Crusader was kind of my little
yeah.
desire.
Edmund asks, which one is the most anti-tank? Um, Probably.
Uh,
skimming through them here.
so
Probably
any
the
one of them.
Crusader.
Now, the Crusader, if you're going to be shooting, because you got the thermal lance on it, but you can
Yeah.
also do like the Knight Errant, which is you could take the thermal cannon on it, and then you can take the Thunderstrike Gauntlet, so that you can also have the close combat with it as well.
Hmm.
Um, so that's an option for you too. So that's you can go straight up on both sides of it. But the Knight Castellan probably is going to be the biggest one. That's the
It's
bigger
also
of the big ones.
huge. It's
Yeah.
like and hugely expensive. That's the big
Yes.
part.
Yeah. So it has Titan Hunter allocated against a vehicle or monster. Reroll the damage rolls of one. But it's got the Plasma Decimator. Um, it's at that damage three, which is not typically known as a vehicle killer, but it's got a lot of shots.
Hmm.
And then you got the Volcano Lance with it, which is D6 plus 8 at 18 strength, at AP5. And you get D3 of them. So, and blast,
Yeah,
but against a vehicle that's so that's gonna probably be your biggest boy for things. On average, you're gonna do I think it was like 16 wounds, a little over 16 wounds against
yeah,
a toughness 10 vehicle. So that'll kill a vehicle a turn, but you're paying 500 points for it.
yeah,
I don't know
exactly.
what it is.
Tudu says 500 points of allies in a 2K list. I don't think so. I don't think if you can point me to a page reference, I would love to see that. But I'm pretty sure there's not a limit to allies points wise in 10th edition anymore.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen one.
Yeah,
I
because
could be
the
wrong,
the
but
core rules that I'm aware of don't mention allies at all. It's all basically from whatever codex you're taking them from, which is only knights and um, what you call it, um, Imperial agents. Um, yeah, because free blades um, is the rule for knights. It's if every model in your army has the Imperium keyword, you can either include one Titanic or up to three Armiger. Even if they do not have the faction keyword you select. Um, they can't be given enhancements and they can't be your warlord. Um, so yeah. Um, so um, so yeah, knights are interesting. Um, I don't know if they're going to be the best option. I mean, they seem fun, but you really gotta like. I just can't see them in a tournament. Just because they're, like you said, they're going to get focused on. They are the biggest target, even if you have other targets that may be easier. Um, the um, the problem is target priority, right? It's this big, huge thing that costs a quarter of your army almost. Um, the little ones are better because you can take three. They're smaller targets. They're not as scary. They can put out volume of shots. But they're boring to me. They're not as fun.
oh, I love the thematics of the Knights. Honestly, I've never played them
Yeah,
specifically, but outside looking in, I kind of want to.
yeah,
But in a tournament play, it's just the level of skill is very high
mhm,
in the
mhm.
most places. Um,
Yeah.
even at, like
If you're
middle
trying to
tables.
place, if you're trying to place at a tournament, you can't take anything but whatever the most optimal options are,
Yeah,
because
because
you're going to suffer for it because the top tier players are are already ready for you. So
it's all about being optimal and efficient with your choices because your opponent can work around their battle plan to kill your knight that you spent a quarter of your points on and continue their game plan.
exactly.
So, if you're doing a more casual game at the game store, maybe you're not pushing so hard to do those things, and it's something that you can
Yeah.
easily take, and that's okay. Not that the local game store player doesn't have a high skill level, but typically speaking, you're not pushing as hard to like, yeah, let's optimize just as
Right,
crazy fine as possible. So this would be a better take a night, at least at a local club game or like a random pickup game where that's the case. You know, ideally you're not going to find someone unless you ask for that, that
right,
highly tuned tournament list.
right,
So
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, there's plenty of, like, you said, there's plenty of competitive players in local game stores. Don't get us wrong. But when you're going to something like Nova, right? You're going and you're trying to place in the top 10 even. You're going to be playing against some of the best players in the world. So, is it right for that list? No. Um, some of these Agents of the Imperium options would be Caldas, Vindicare, maybe the Exaction Squad for cheap bodies, certainly. But in all the other games that you're going to play, yeah, it's fine to run a knight. Um, as long as you know what you're doing with it. That's going to be the big thing. Is it just like anything else? You can have success with a unit that's not necessarily the most synergistic thing ever for your army, as long as you're well practiced with the list.
yeah, so I think on this particular topic, kind of evolved around it a little bit on that, but I kind of want to circle around just a tiny bit with this, to kind of summarize my thoughts on it. So, do we need them? No. But I have a caveat on that. I feel like in the current state of the game, which I think we're going to transition into here in just a minute, but I think in the current state of the game, we need a way to counter some gatekeeper lists. And when I say gatekeeper lists, I'm talking about like Necrons, custodians, things of that nature that are tough, but maybe not even necessarily the top tier S tier stuff.
You
But we
think
have to be
Necrons are
able.
that good?
I
Like it's
think they could counter us really hard if we have not enough ways to counter their warrior spam.
mhm.
Yes, they do have uh, a pretty hard combo. They're the unkillable Lich Guards, but they can be ignored. If you ignore them, you're going to win.
Yeah,
But the warriors can be pretty tough to handle if you aren't prepared for it. And I think investing 115 points into Calidus is not a bad idea,
yeah,
especially if you're trying to
yeah.
go. So that's my caveat. I think you really should really look strongly at it, simply because of its utility with the CP prevention, or I should say the CP addition to the stratagems. You just have to know your opponent's stratagems well enough um, to kind of make best use of it, and that'll take practice and a little bit
Fortunately,
of
that's a
research.
lot easier now that they only have 6 strats
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
like 2 dozen, and it's like which ones are the good ones? You know what I mean?
yeah.
So,
And even
um,
then, it's only like two or three that are probably going to be used the most.
right. There's
Um,
some fringe ones that are like useful in a certain circumstance, but there's only really about half of those that are going to be used every single time, kind of thing. So, and then the other 12 strats in the game is all the or maybe it's just 6. I can't remember. I think it's the core strats. You should know those anyway because you're using them too. So, yeah,
yeah,
uh, I think Necrons are interesting against us because I feel like we're one of the few armies that can murder a block of Lich Guard or a block of uh, warriors before they can reanimate. Now, obviously, it takes certain units to do that, but Sword Bros with Helbricht can absolutely do it. Um, a huge fat blob of Crusader squads can absolutely take out a blob of Necron warriors. Um, so Uh, the thing about Lich Guard is if you take most people are taking shields so that they can take they don't have to take Orokin to get the 4++ for them, which most of you know this. I'm a Necron player too. I like the scythes. I think the scythes are much cooler looking, so I built my Lich Guard as scythes. So I would take Orokin with them and take scythes. The other reason for doing that is the swords that come with the shields are crap. So if you're going up against someone who's playing Lich Guard and there's a block of Lich Guard, um, you know, it, they're not super scary. Yeah, they're like nearly unkillable, but their hyper phase sword is strength 6, AP 2, damage 1, hitting on threes. And with a character, which of course they'll have, it'll hit on twos. So that's not that great. And it's how many attacks is it? Three attacks. So, that's not overly scary. Um, they're going to be taking a probably a Technomancer with them for the 5+ feel no pain, and they're going to be taking either a Lord or an Overlord to get the -1 to wound against themselves, and either to get the Res Orb for their resurrection, and probably an Overlord for the free strat to be able to use it the Res strat for free. Um, so um, so yeah, but by comparison, the War Scythes are only two attacks, but they're Strength 8, AP 3, and 2 damage with devastating wounds. That's a much scarier profile, in my opinion. So I feel like uh, they're better off with Scythes and Orokin, but that's just my own take. I know a lot of people are running the shields. People have always loved the shields. Um, so you know, but even still, Helbrecht and company can chew through them pretty quickly because uh, they have such volume of attacks, and our melee abilities are really good. So they're not a unit we should really fear in melee or fear to do anything if they have shields, other than stand on an objective and be hard to kill. So
Yeah, so their center field bully unit, which is what Space Marines like to do, is to go to the center of the board and hold
yeah,
the center of the board. So they're a threat to us there. And but like you mentioned, it's kind of a list dependent. So like my list that I've been playing and doing fairly well with, I run MSU. My list can't kill that unit.
yeah,
Um, I can't kill a warrior block. I can kill half of a warrior block, or maybe two, three-fourths of it, with my sword brother, 5-man sword brother. But I can't get the whole thing. It just there's not enough attacks in the unit to be able to do it.
yeah.
But with that being
You'd have to
said,
multi-charge.
yes, you could. I could take multiple units to do it. Now that's the benefit of the MSU, and that's how I would deal with something like that. But I also play the game in a different way than the blunt force. I'm going to throw my block at you and just deal with me.
Yeah,
So, um, so that's why it's kind of a gatekeeper list. It's because Necrons are solidly right there in the center of the win rate. If I remember, they're like 47%, 48%.
something
So
like that. They're
they
right there with us.
they're. I mean, you have to know how to beat them. So the Calidus is a way to get around that because once you take out their resurrection, they're gonna fall over like a wet blanket.
Yeah,
So
being able to use that strat every turn is really needed for them. That and res orbs are their two big things. Reanimators are really good for them now too. Um, giving them extra models back in a huge aura. So that doesn't need line of sight anymore. So they they definitely are durable, but not necessarily particularly deadly. At least in like warriors and lich guard. Like warriors honestly aren't that scary anymore as far as shooting. A
yeah,
20 man does not do nearly as much damage as it used to because they nerf the hell out of their guns and their shooting. They only hit on fours now, which is BS. But you know, it's it's one of those things. Lich Guard, like they can deal damage, even with the swords, they can deal damage, but it's not as scary as some of the output that we can dish out, but they are really hard to kill. So you just got to be prepared for that kind of stuff. Grand Enforcer, super chat, thank you so much. Rookie question: while we're running Righteous Crusader Detachment, obviously, do we get Oath of Moment? I was told no at a local game. As always, thank you for the strategies and insight. Thank you for your support. Oath of Moment is a Space Marine rule, as Rogue points out. It doesn't matter what faction you choose, as far as like, if you're choosing one of the non-codex compliant or really any, if you have like a sub faction, basically, it doesn't matter. Every Space Marine chapter gets Oath of Moments. Period. It
Yes,
is part of the core of the army. So so yeah,
it is not
uh,
detachment
yeah, it is
based.
not a detachment rule. It is an army rule. So so yeah, and I think I want to say that even says that somewhere. Let's see if we can find out.
That's a little bit sketch that your whomever told you that said that, because every army has army rules and then they have detachment rules. So
Yeah,
they're trying to take away the biggest ability that we have, which is a Space Marine ability.
yeah. Yeah, and if you look at the Black Templar's Righteous Crusader, um, it says if your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, you can use the Righteous Crusader's detachment. So, um, it's your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, not Black Templars. Um, the where the chapter keywords come in is if you look at the index, it says you cannot include um, more than one chapter's keyword. So you can't have like Ultramarines and Black Templar keywords in the same list. So so yeah. So tell them to go reread the rules.
That's unfortunate. But
Yeah,
hopefully, it's not a big group of people,
yeah,
um, because that would be unfortunate. But they need to be re-educated, and I imagine if it's a big group of people, some of them have played Space Marines or are Space Marine players,
hmm
and they should be.
yeah, yeah. This is all covered too in the index. I'll go over it real quick for everyone. Otho Moment says if your army faction is Adeptus Astartes, then at the start of your command phase, blah 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 blah, you get to do the rule. And then there's a box out that says um, Space Marine chapters. If an Adeptus Astartes unit has a second faction keyword on its data sheet, that faction keyword is the name of that unit's chapter. It gives an example. You cannot include units from more than one chapter in your army. So, so yeah, so that's where that comes in. Uh, the Righteous Crusaders additionally has another restriction that says your army can include Black Templars units, but it cannot include any Adeptus Astartes units drawn from any other chapter. So, basically, your army faction is going to be Adeptus Astartes. And then you can include Black Templar. Like you can run Righteous Crusaders without taking any Black Templar units. None of them have the Black Templar keyword. Like none of the generic units will gain. It's not like 10th edition where there was a selectable keyword, or 9th edition, excuse me, where there were those selectable keywords. That's gone. If they have a keyword, a faction keyword, then you can't include any other different faction keywords, and that's basically it. It's really quite simple now, which I like
Yeah.
a lot. There was a lot of confusion about like in 9th edition about the selectable keyword and blah 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 and all that stuff. So Rogue says Girlyman and Helbricht will no longer fight together. Apparently, I don't think they ever fought together, to be honest with you.
Nope, nope. I still haven't read that book, but I'm told it was a little
Oh,
questionable.
Knight of the Throne.
Albrecht, the Albrecht book.
Yeah, I need to finish reading it. I started it and I never finished it. I know. Heresy. Um, yeah. I got distracted by something and I forgot it existed. So so I need to go back and
Like,
read
well,
it.
maybe I'll have to go read it now.
Yeah, I need to read it. I bought the limited edition, special edition one of it. Um, so um, uh, so yeah, it's just a matter of I need to. I don't do as well with physical books. If it's digital, I read much better because I can use my tablet. It's mobile with me. Like, the physical book is cool to have, but I read better when it's digital. I don't know why. So, um, so yeah, we talked a little bit about Necrons. Custodes are, I think, a bigger challenge for us because while Necrons have some decent units in melee, Scorpex were nerfed into the ground. Um, so they don't have like a ton of really good melee versus Custodes do. And they're even harder to kill, in my opinion, than Necrons because there's only like 5 models on the board.
Yeah, and it starts with their strength of data sheet, honestly. But what takes them over the top, because I don't want to forget the name of it, is Arcane Genetic Alchemy. And this was something I was kind of leading into with the Calidus. So it's a 2 CP stratagem that they can use in the shooting phase or the fight phase. So they can use it multiple times a turn if they need to. It's an infantry unit, obviously, and its effect is until the end of the phase. Each time an attack is allocated to that model in the unit, you subtract one from the damage characteristic. So if you already look at the huge um, power of the custodian as it is, so like for example, just a basic stat line custodian, and it's going to differ slightly, is their movement 6, toughness 6, 2+ saves. They typically have 3 wounds, and their OC of 2. Um,
With a 4-up invul.
yeah, with the 4 pinball, and some of them could deep strike, some of them can't. But and they also have melee weapons that are very good. They're all damage 2.
Yep.
Typically, they're AP 2, give or take. Um, and then they have built-in guns with those, which are also damage 2. So while they're fairly expensive, typically you're looking at 50 to 60 points. I believe, um, give or take. But they're very tough. So when you go into them, you want multi-damage units. So like Thunder Hammers, you want like Sword Brethren, that type of thing. So you're obviously wanting to buff that damage to 2 for the Sword Brethren so that you can kill them more efficiently, even though you're going to have overflow
Hmm.
damage. But what they're going to do is they're just going to use that stratagem
Yep.
to take off the 1 damage. And now it takes 2 CP, but if you have a Calidus assassin in the list, you can make it C3 CP, which makes it unusable the first turn unless they save their points.
Yeah.
And you're basically going to probably eliminate the use of that being used multiple times a
Yeah.
game, simply by having the Calidus, which makes them killable. If you don't have that, they're going to use it at least 1 time a turn, and you're not going to be able to kill them. They just straight up, they're going to sit there in the center of the board. They're going to beat you because they natively get that damage too. They're going to kill you more efficiently, so you need to charge them, um, and they're just going to sit there, and you're not going to be able to do anything.
Yeah. Gunnerside says what makes the Custodes hard to deal with is the Blade Guard champ and the strat that gives them as good as army wide fights first.
Yep,
So
that's another one of their
I'm
good ones that
pulling.
they
What's that
have.
one called? I'm pulling it up right now.
Um,
I'm not very familiar with Custodes. I'll be
Unwavering
honest with
Sentinels, I think it's called.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, 2 CP.
Unwavering Sentinels.
um, yeah,
Basically, give.
one Adeptus Custodes unit from your army. That is within range of an objective marker. So it does have to be within range of an objective marker, and then it has the fights first ability, which is really mean. It is 2 CP, but still.
Yeah, and
Um,
then what the Blade Champion does is it's basically the champion for us. So it has their rules called Legacy Combat, but it can do the free uh, heroic intervention,
yeah,
and then it has reroll advanced charges for it. So basically, you take a big blob of guardians with the Blade Champion and park it right there in the center of the board, and anytime you come anywhere close to it, it has fight first and will kill something.
yeah,
And if you get close to it with something that is dangerous, that's when they use the other stratagem to reduce your damage.
yeah,
So it's very tough to bully the center of the board with them. Um, if you are a more elite Black Templars unit build, I think this is going to be a much tougher fight for you, a much
yeah,
tougher, because you don't have the ability to maneuver around the board like you need to.
right. Something to note about heroic intervention is, and I think a lot of people forget this, is that it is not like the way it worked in ninth. In ninth, you just had to be within range in your opponent's charge phase in order to do it. So, like, if you had a character within range, whatever, whether it was 3 or 6 inches or whatever, depending on that character's ability, that character could heroically intervene, um, you know, uh, regardless of what your opponent did. In 10th, and now it's a strat that any unit can use, but it has to have been your opponent has to have made a charge move, or yeah, made a charge move. So
Yep.
you cannot just like if you end your turn or get to your charge phase, um, and your unit is within 6 inches of theirs, they can't just use that strat and charge into you. You have to make a charge move in order for them to do it. So something important to note, it's a you know distinction from ninth and a crucial one because if your opponent doesn't realize that because they're thinking in ninth mentality and you don't know the rule either, and they tell you, oh yeah, I can do this, it's a charge phase, so okay, and you let it happen, that can cost you the game, especially against custodes. So so yeah. um, Yeah, I think if you have a lot of Custodes players in your meta, a Calidus is something that you should really consider. To really neuter that strat. 3 CP is a lot for that. So, uh, Grand Enforcer, what are good examples of when you should use heroic intervention?
So a good example is when you have a list that use screen units, or more specifically infiltrators to get to objectives, and you have units that are behind it because that's typically what you want to do. More important units following your screens. A good example would be like the infiltrators flanking objective, and maybe you have some stored brethren that are killing by nearby, um, because there's an incoming threat. Well, they're gonna because the infiltrators are on the objective and they're presumably holding it, and they got the 12-inch bubble, so that's a threat to your opponent. Typically, your opponent will try and shoot them. This is just a hypothetical. Your opponent is going to charge them to try and kill you. So, but your sword brethren are not in range of the charge because they're screened a little bit too far. But those infiltrators get charged, they're going to die. So you can use heroic intervention on them if you're within range. It's the 3 inches, and you can get into combat to do that if you need to. So it needs to be used in combination of methods typically, or if you use, say, example like impulsors,
Hmm.
Sword Brethren, you can use the impulsor to screen um, and prevent movement. So that could be something that you force that impulsor right in front of your opponent, so they have to go around it or just charge it to try and kill it. And then that could be something that you use if you have like a Primaris company champion to get the free heroic intervention at the 6 inches, so then you can get into range and charge into that unit once they try and kill it. So
Yeah.
that's a tactic I like to use with my impulsor is body blocking, basically, with my impulsor to prevent movement. So they have to charge into it, and that's how I use my company champion to enable that heroic intervention.
Yeah, and
How-
the the when of using the strat is your opponent's charge phase just after an enemy unit ends a charge move. That's important too. Whereas like Overwatch is before or after, heroic intervention is only after. So if you are wanting to charge something, let's say you've got that nasty custodes unit with the free heroic intervention just waiting there, but you want to charge something off in a different direction. If you end more than 6 inches away from them, they can't use it because they're outside of the range. And it's also important to note for you to know that too, for when something comes at you, it's at the end. Um, the other big thing is that it's when they end a charge move. That's important to note because if you go to charge and you fail, they can't heroically intervene you because you did not make a charge move. So some important nuances there on the wording to note so that you're not going to get caught by someone who's not reading the rule properly. Um, so yeah, I think that's a good example, Bob, of you know when to use that. Um, a unit that either was bait or you knew was going to get charged anyway. Um, or maybe you want it to live. It's like only got a few models left or something, and you need that unit to live. You can charge something else in, to help out and maybe distract your opponent.
Yeah. So another good way of using it, and I don't. It would be good if I played different style lists on it, but like I said, I've talked many times about it. I like to play MSU. It's typically what I build for. But what you can do with heroic convention, and a lot of players do, is you have the big scary melee unit that's out there. So you have that on the board, going to the objective or going wherever you're going to put it based on your battle plan. And your opponent's like recognizing the fact that they need to charge it to kill it, so that you have it. Presumably, it doesn't fight first. But you have weaker units, whether it be just whatever it may be. Maybe you have like an Emperor champion on like the So what you can do is you can have that unit nearby. They're going to charge that more dangerous unit to kind of eliminate that threat potentially. And you have the Emperor's Champion. Maybe it's like on like an assault interception squad, perhaps just a carrier for the character.
Yeah,
Heroic intervention them in, and then now you have your character that is in uh, combat. So
yeah,
it could be maybe that main unit is the Primaris Crusader squad. It's not really bait. You're legitimately using that to attack and to do what you need to do.
yeah.
But that's the bigger threat because your opponent's not really going to go for necessarily that assault intercessor squad or whatever unit it is,
Right.
and think of that as the bigger threat at that particular moment. Then that can be the way that you get that character into combat is utilizing the heroic intervention. But
Yeah,
obviously, if you don't have something to buff the range of the heroic intervention, you're going to have to be pretty close, which limits it a little bit because then you might get multi-charged.
yep.
So that's something to think about too.
Also note it does not give you fights first. You
Yes, it
do
does.
specifically do not get any charge bonuses. So when you heroically intervene, which is another reason why the blade guard or the blade champion thing on custodes is pretty gross because they can use the thing for free and then they have the strat to give them fights first anyway, which is pretty nasty. So, um, we don't really have any way to do that except with a judiciar. So just something to be aware of when you heroically intervene, you do not get the fights first. So, um, your opponent will get to swing at that unit uh, unless there's multiple combats and you can interrupt. So So yeah,
So yeah, custodies are a pretty tough take for Space Marines simply because everything that they do naturally kills Space Marines.
yeah, yeah,
So we have to have efficient ways to either gang up on them or outmaneuver them, which is easier than it would seem. Uh,
easier said than
but
done.
uh, but they have the ability to take out their maneuvering pieces. So that's yeah. So they have dreadnoughts that are kind of hard to kill and deal with, as well as their tanks, which have some
Yeah.
some
So
good fire.
what about the elephant in the room, Bob? Eldari sitting still at almost 70% win rate.
I won't lie, this is going to be a very tough game for you. I'm about 50% with them, and it really is how fast you can kill their fire prisms. If you
Yeah,
cannot kill their fire prisms fast enough, you will lose. The reason why that is because they can sit in the back and they can redirect fire you, and they can combine shots because they won't take one; they will always take two, so that they can combine the shots
yep,
to kill something. But their fate dice not being able to use multiple times a turn on the same thing to get overflow wounds has helped. But you're probably seeing two fire prisms, 1 to 2 wraith knights on the list. Wraith knights, because of the fate dice, you can kind of ignore maybe. At least that first initial turn while you're focusing on those fire prisms. Um, but after turn 2, if it's not down, you're gonna lose. So those are the two big targets you need to deal with right away. Is the Wraith Knight and the Fire Prisms. If you do not deal with those, they're just gonna to put out so many more wounds on you. You're just not gonna be able to deal with them, and you're gonna lose units way too fast. And that is already on top of the fact that a lot of their units, their basic units, are very efficient for what they do. Um, that's why they're so good. But their firepower is excellent. They have a lot of tricks that they can do, shadow specters that they can do. They can jump in, kind of like the Inceptors can, get on an objective, fire, move afterwards, so they can get out of range. They have a lot of tricks that they can do. Now, with the exception of Wraith units, they're very, very fragile, though.
yeah.
So
They're
we
squishy.
can kill them. If you have two Lancers, you can deal with the Wraith Knight. Or, I'm sorry, the Fire Prisms.
Yeah,
If you deploy correctly. If you do not deploy correctly, you're going to lose your
your
Lancers,
lancers. Yep. So yeah,
and it's going to be game over.
we should really probably have Orion on maybe a video specifically talking about Eldar because he just played in an RTT. He said yesterday, I think, and all three people he played against were Eldar. He would have beat all three of them, but the last player was apparently like one of those people and was really obnoxious. And Orion had finally had enough of it and just conceded first place to him because he didn't want to deal with his really, really bad sportsmanship. I haven't had a chance to read through the thread. He's posted on the Discord about it, but I think his success against Eldar in those games yesterday, I think could be interesting to see. See what strategies he used because they are definitely the best army in the game right now, still, despite the nerfs, which were apparently not enough, which I guess is good on one hand, right? That GW didn't over nerf them, as they've been wont to do in the past, where it's like, oh, this army is too good, and they just completely gut them, and then they're trash. And as much as I hate Eldar, that's not the right way to balance the game, right? That's not the right way to go about taking care of an army that's doing too much. Um, so I'm sure we'll see some more changes to bring them down some more in September when the balance data sheet comes out. GSC are pretty high up there too, aren't they? Still?
Yeah, they're still high win rates, simply because they can take MSU is very good again. Um, they can do it mechanized as well, but their issue is they have deployment shenanigans, and they have so many units that you have to be able to kill for you to take the objectives and do your secondaries. That's their kind of their stick. So what they do is they deploy as pretty far forward, um, block you up, and then they follow up with the rest of their units. Either they'll have some strategic reserve, um, and kind of get on the board and block you up, so you can't do what you want to do, and you have to kill 26 units versus the average of like 15,
Yeah.
18.
Now
Um,
they did nerf them on their uh, ability where you can't string out the guys off the blip anymore. They all have to be within 3 inches of the blip. And one guy only has to be touching it still. But previously, you could string them all out. You just had one guy touching it, and you could string them all out and screen really well, and it was obnoxious. And now they got to be within 3 inches of that blip um, in order to come back. Um, so yeah, so it's which is doable for them, but it just nerfs the unintended consequence of them people stringing them out like that. So so yeah, I think uh, the problem,
infiltrators are is kind of how you take care of them.
yeah, the problem with GSC is, yeah, they're easy to kill. They're basically glass cannons. Like they're gonna hit you really hard,
Yep.
and they have a shitload of them. They're so cheap. You can just field them, and when they come back, their stupid demo charges are, that's a once per
Refilled.
game. They're refilled, which is absurd. That shouldn't be the case, in my opinion. But it is. So hopefully they'll nerf that too, because that's what they're doing. And there's those units that carry them are, I think, are troops or battle line or whatever, so they're guaranteed to
Yep.
come back. You don't have to roll for them. At least their characters don't get to come back, so that helps. But um, it's still really oppressive. Those two armies are definitely still need, you know, some toning down, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
Unfortunately for the GSC players, is it takes a ton of practice to get the army
they
down.
are a high skill cap army, that's for sure. But if you have someone
So
who knows what they're doing with them, you're gonna struggle.
it's it's unfortunately that's a game where you definitely take a chess clock to,
Yeah,
because your opponent will take all of the time otherwise.
yeah,
If you're in a tournament. So you see GSC, call for that chess clock, because you get
in a
them.
tournament.
Yes.
So, if you're chess clock on a casual game, maybe ease up off the gas.
you,
unless
you
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 unless you both
you
are
are right
specifically practicing for a tournament. So,
now. So that's a big one up there. So typically that's going to be a tough matchup. So um, kind of circling back around on Elderai just a little bit. I've grudgingly feel like the Gladius detachment has the better shot at beating them, simply because we need to have the ability to match shooting with them right away initially, and
mhm.
then counterattack. So having bolter discipline um, is kind of an important piece there.
Yeah, I can see that.
But
That being said, overall, Righteous Crusader still has a better win percentage.
it does. It's
So,
better against a larger variety of opponents.
yeah. So unless, uh, your tournament, uh, opponents are just, your meta is just flush with a bunch of Eldar players. Um, and that's not to say you can't win with Crusaders. They just,
Yeah,
Gladius just has a few extra tricks that help you early game, versus, Righteous Crusaders does.
Uh, everything else, other than I think we deal with Marines just fine. In my opinion, based on what I've seen, the only one that kind of comes close to us is Space Wolves. Some cool things. Not really. Blood Angels are not really scary. Nothing.
That's because
Ultramarines aren't really
Sangard are
scary.
terrible. Well, not
Well,
terrible. They're overcosted.
they
They're
need
better
to
than
be after
Vanguard
last
vets.
edition.
Yeah.
It's
That's
made for
they're
their
paying for the
sins.
sins of ninth, along with Vanguard vets. They're definitely paying for the sins of ninth.
So, I mean, Space Marines we can deal with. Tyranids are they're pretty good as well, but you deal with them the same way that you would deal with anything else. Um, just make sure that you're taking care of their objective units first. Deal with their high-powered units secondly, if you can avoid it. If they have certain units like the big guns that are doing damage to your 2D support units, then you obviously need to try to them. But you can deal with those. Um, really, I mean, Jakari's out there too, but they're pretty standard now. They can
They're not as
do a
bad as they
lot of
were.
Dark Lance. Yeah, not nearly as bad. They typically Dark Lance spam shooting. Um, they will have one dangerous unit with Lilith, Hesperex with witches, which will cream anything that the charges. But Incubi are not scary anymore. The Covens are not scary anymore. What's scary is the basically going back to fifth edition games and their Dark Lances.
Yeah,
So Dark Lances were kind of scary in last edition too when they first came out, but they weren't taken so much as they are really now. So like
right.
now you're gonna see like 20
Well, that's because of the
Dark
nerfs to the
Lances.
other parts of the army that they sort of need to go back to that. So,
So
yeah.
so
So
you're welcome.
what do you think Space Marines need? We're Black Templars are one of the higher end Space Marines. We're sitting at like 46% win percentage. What do you think that we need to get over that 50% mark?
What needs to happen is we need to have, and this is the best way to fix this immediately. We need to have units that are cost effective, that have close combat ability, and shooting ability. So I'm talking about Centurions, assault Centurions. We need the ability to shoot and have close combat with them. Again, at a reasonable price. We need,
They got
um,
gutted. Poor
yeah, they're,
Sens.
they aggressors would be another one. Aggressors need to be able to come back.
Yeah.
Um, things that we can leverage as both a shooting unit that can deal with either infantry or vehicles, depending on what you take it for,
Hmm.
and you be able to use their close combat ability. Because right now in the codex, it's one or the other.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to shoot something. You're not going to be able to kill something. The high performing lists right now are have units that can do both, that are doing both, or they just put out so much damage that they can't help but be good. For example, um, the fire prisms or the wraith knights that can overflow all of those mortal wounds. So we don't have a source of mortal wounds. It would be nice if we had one.
Yeah, not
That would
really.
help a little bit. But that is where we can do it because we are more expensive than pretty much every other army out there. Custodes is an extreme example. It's not, but they have the ability to be in close combat and shoot you and kill you. The problem with it right now is that we have damage a ton of damage on weapons, a ton of them, but they don't have the number of shots to be able to be effective.
Right.
That's so that's really hamstringing us. So we have to utilize all of these units in a certain point allotment We have many less units than these higher performing armies have, and not a huge reliable way of getting stuff back. So, like Necrons, they can bring back tons of warriors per turn. You have GSC, they basically regenerate them. Tyranids
Mhm.
can do the same thing, they get free units back. We don't have a way of doing that. We have an apothecary that can bring back one guy
One guy.
per turn, one per turn. If
It
you
doesn't
take them,
even provide the feel no pain anymore.
yep.
So
So that's one of the reasons why uphold is so important, is because at least it gives us some additional durability on the board. If
yeah,
you're taking Gladius or something else like that, or a different Vow, we don't have that durability, so we're limited in what we can do. We need duality in our units to be successful, to have units that are
especially with
can
as
provide.
expensive as Space Marines are.
Yeah, that was kind of my point.
Yeah.
So when we're spending 330 points for a Sword Brethren unit that has, admittedly a very good melee capability, and that's fine. It can fulfill that role. But it would be nice if we had something that could take in the list that was also good at doing something else. Um, we have very few of them. Examples would be Redemptors. That's why I'm taking Redemptors now, because it can shoot and it can be melee.
Mhm.
Uh, but there's so few of them now, that we could do. Aggressors was one of those centerpiece units that we could
So were
put in the middle of the board.
Centurions.
Yep, the Centurions. Just that, those are just two examples, but that would be the way to do it. Is if you have a unit that is maybe not as good in close combat, maybe buff it up a little bit to give it some utility there, so that it's dual role, so that it can contribute in the shooting phase and in the melee phase, because that's one of our Space Marines' biggest problem is we rely too much on, or especially the Black Templars, we rely too much on melee to do it, to fulfill our game plan.
Yeah.
And if you're not built correctly, you don't have the correct list to kind of utilize, uh, to get shooting and also still get the objectives and secondaries, you're going to struggle because your opponent has more guns than you and typically has damage to stuff that's going to kill you.
Yep.
Or they have so many units that they don't care if you kill whatever it is, they're going to have way more units than you anyway, and they can still fulfill objectives. So that's that's what I would say would be the number one way of fixing what we need to do, is getting some duality
Yeah.
or drastic points decreases so we can just take more stuff.
Yeah.
But that's not.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, and I don't think that points decreases are necessarily the answer. Um, I think
Yeah, I don't like that way of balancing.
not for Space Marines. I don't mind having fewer units as long as they're good and durable and they feel like Space Marines. Which leads into Grand Enforcer's question: what about lowering the prices on Sword Brethren and Primaris Crusaders? I actually don't think they need points drops. They're kind of ridiculously cheap for what you get from both of them. I mean, Sword Bros are the are the best Space Marine melee unit there is, and Primaris Crusaders are, you know, kind of shockingly good in melee for their points. So I don't think they need I don't think they need any points drops there for either one of those units. I wouldn't touch them at all, actually.
Alex, can you boost me?
Yeah. Let's see.
My mic is so good actually that we have to reduce my volume because it kills everything. It's very, very sensitive.
Let's see. All right, there we go. Hopefully that's better for everyone.
Yeah. Hopefully I don't blow your result, which is typical.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I think you're right. Some of the units that had those abilities to do both in ninth edition just got nerfed into the ground in 10th. I mean, aggressors are okay, but not what they were. And Centurions really just got torn down for no reason at all. Like, they lost half their shots. They have nobody that can join them now. They went up in durability. They got higher toughness, but um, I think they lost an attack. Uh, on their melee. Their melee strength didn't go up, whereas strength 10 in ninth edition was the best of the best. I mean, you could wound anything in the game on threes. Now you're not even wounding vehicles on threes anymore. So it's hard because yeah, they have three attacks. They lost an AP. They lost two AP actually. They were AP 4. They are now AP 2. And it's twin linked, but which helps. It's still rough. They really took it on the chin for no reason. They weren't like dominating the meta. Like I don't understand some of these choices that GW made. Like why? Like yeah, Vanguard vets were being taken by literally every Space Marine chapter, but was that a reason? Like it's not like Space Marines were dominating the meta because of Vanguard vets, but they just gutted them. And I think it's partially because we're probably going to be seeing a jump pack Primaris unit soon, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. So I feel like they went a little bit ham-fisted on units that had duality of some kind. Um, maybe they felt like Space Marines and those particular units were too oppressive because, again, they had multiple different times through 8th and 9th edition where Space Marines were just so strong that they couldn't deal anything could deal with them. But ultimately, I think that's what we're going to have to wait on is either through the Codex getting an adjustment with that, which this is one of the rare times I haven't heard anything about anything in the Codex. I have heard exactly zero. So, um, which is unfortunate,
It's still pretty
but
far away too, as I recall.
yeah, sometime this fall, early winter is what
Fall,
it's supposed to be.
yeah, which could
Um,
mean anytime between September and December.
but if rumors are to be believed, it does not sound it's going to be Vanguard vets in the Codex, but they do exist. I know that they exist. Um, but I would suspect they're going to be like one of those mid edition drops at like the
Yeah, yeah, we'll have to see. Um, I think uh, hopefully we'll see what they do in September with the balance data sheet. See if Space Marines get any buffs there, or if maybe by bringing down some of the overperforming chapters factions, they that in turn increases Space Marine win rate. I don't know. It's always hard, to kind of determine, you know, what's too much, what's not enough, what's the right amount of changes to make. Because if you make too many changes, then you don't know where the problem was, if it goes wrong the other way. So, um, I expect Eldar and I expect GSC to be nerfed because both of them are way overperforming, um, like by huge margins. So honestly, I think Fate dice need to be not able to trigger critical hits and critical wounds. Um, if you take that away, because now they suddenly can't just turn up, high damage stuff into mortal wounds on you, right? Which makes it a lot easier, or a little bit easier at least. But beyond that, I don't know. maybe points increases for GSC since they get free units essentially. Um,
Yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know really what to do with Eldar. It's a finely balanced balancing act, right? It's a razor's edge, right? Too much and they're terrible, but not enough, and they continue to dominate, which is what happened the last time. So they need to continue to tweak, and hopefully GW will make measured responses. They're not always known for that, um, so we'll have to see what happens there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that they're taking at least the time to let games go and tournament data to come in
Hmm.
before they put out the, the data slate. So I know if they playtest these um, before they put them out, so we're not going to see fundamental list building changes from the data slate. It will happen with the codex, but we're probably 6 months away from 5 to 6 months. At earliest 4 months. So it's going to be slight changes because they don't want to throw the sledgehammer this early in the game because they're
Well,
trying to avoid
we
what
hope
happened.
that they don't do that.
Yeah, I mean,
They are not always
I don't,
known for that. Uh,
I,
you
I
know.
don't know what the right answer is. If like just nerfing them or trying to buff everyone else up. Because if you look at their data slate, and I actually like what Games Workshop does versus something like the Meta Mondays that we do on a Discord that is generated by some people on Reddit
Mhm.
um, for win rates, but they take rogue trader tournaments and GTs into consideration into their win rates, whereas the win rates of most tournaments that you see, like Green Hammer, they just take the GTs into it, so they don't include the 28 or less
Yeah.
tournaments that you see, which I think is really important because most players are not able to travel to big tournaments. Um, and even if they are, there's still a huge subset of the community that plays in smaller tournaments. So at that level, still need to have the data from that. So I like
Yeah.
that they do that. But if you're my point kind of was getting to is if you look at their win rates, it's a good 1/3 to almost half of the lists that are or armies that are below 45% win.
Yeah.
So you have to address all of them. So I would be willing to bet that we're probably going to see buffs rather than nerfs. There
Nerfs.
might be slight nerfs
Yeah.
to the top list, but I think they're probably going to buff to like do buffs across the board on everything else to try and bring them up to that level rather than take away. That would be my thought on it. But I'm not Games Workshop, and who knows? But
So something that I always try to do, and I try to encourage other people to as well, is take the win rates with a grain of salt, or even a pile of salt. And the reason is 40K is a very complex game, right? And when you're looking at winning percentage, you're talking about everyone from the best players in the world all the way to mostly casual gamers, because those people still go to tournaments. Thousands, hundreds and hundreds of people go to these large tournaments, and they run the gamut. Not every one of them is a hardcore tournament player. Most of them are not. They're just going for the experience to play in a huge thing, play a bunch of 40K, and have fun. Only a small percentage of those people are the top players in the world. The other thing is that when you have a faction that is overperforming already, then the best players in the world are going to take that faction. And even the players in the mid tier who maybe have that faction and another one, they're going to take the better faction to give them better chances to win. So it skews the numbers in those directions. there's also, because it's a dice game, there's like so many variables that go into a game between just the dice, the terrain, the mission, opponent skill, your skill. Like there's so many variables that go into a game of 40K that, you know, in order to have a really realistic data set number that you can go, this is how good this faction is based on win percentage, you have to have many times the amount of games played than you would in a sample set of something else that has less variables. So that's something just to keep in mind. Not that win rates are useless, they're not. Um, but they're not the end all be all of uh, you know, 40K stats, in my opinion.
Yeah, but while I agree with that, you just like there's no other way of really measuring it, though, because you know tabletop beer and pretzels, there's no way to generate stats for that, and honestly, would you to?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
but
Ultimentra says the most hardcore tournament players will be able to naturally identify and gravitate towards the best factions. They aren't going to play the below 50% win rate factions just because. I agree.
and this,
Well, we're different. But yeah, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but like the majority of the players that are wanting to try to place in a tournament are not going to play a faction with below 50% win rate, unless they're out to prove something, or they're like you, and it's just that's what they do, and that's the faction they want to play because it's not just about winning, it's about winning with your faction. So
yeah. And a lot of these players, these hardcore tournament players, and it's kind of going on, but a lot of these people are that's their livelihood.
mhm,
They rely on proving that they're the best players in the world, so they need to use the factions that
mhm,
are the best to give them the most tactical advantage because they rely on things like Patreons and memberships and coachings to basically earn an income to live,
yep,
and that's their job.
yep,
Perfect perfect example is Art of War. They are the best in the world, and they recruit the best in the world because that is their income.
yeah,
So they don't work day jobs, so they have time to stream and do all those things all day long, and that's how you really become the best in the world is to play thousands of games.
yep,
But
exactly.
that's a tangent for that, but you know
It's a topic for a different
yeah,
day. So we're almost out of time here. I got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, throw that out there. We love answering your guys' questions and talking what you guys want to hear. That's what the purpose of these streams is for. We pick a topic because we think it's interesting and you guys will want to tune in for it. But ultimately, these streams are about engaging with you guys. Yeah. While we wait and see if anybody has any questions, uh, definitely check out our new dice. We have Patreon exclusive dice now, and they are sick. So go check them out. If you go look on baronofdice.com and see the price on them, yes, it says $40,000. Yes, that's kind
that's
of a joke.
everything.
That's kind of a joke. The reason they're there is because of the way his sales system works. Is we wanted to make sure that only Patreons have access to them, and the only real way to do that with his sales system was to bump the price to something ludicrous. So, so we made it a joke of $40,000. Patrons will not pay that; they'll pay the normal price for dice, but they get a special code, which lets them discount that to the real price. So, check them out though; they're really cool. They've been really popular. I love them. And our regular dice are in stock still as well. So check those out as well. They're really great. Of course, they have square corners. So they're going to roll better than the rounded corner dice. And his dice are really, really quality. So you guys will not be disappointed in checking those out.
We
So
prefer to the design.
what's that?
And I said, if you prefer the rounded dice, they're is there as well. But I prefer the corner.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we learned from our mistakes of the past of not having any stock, and because we've sold thousands, which thank you for all the support.
yeah,
Mostly is going all to Baron of Dice, but we do get a small slice of that, so we
yep,
appreciate
yep.
all of that. Plus, it's awesome to
To
see. I
rep our
actually
brand,
was
we appreciate you guys repping our brand. So
I actually saw someone repping my dice at
nice.
a game in the Twin Cities a couple weekends ago, so that was pretty awesome.
Nice, awesome. Well, that's all we got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed the stream, and we have more content coming from. I know I made a community post. I'm sorry that we've been a bit behind in our usual pace of content, but life has got in the way a little bit, especially for me. We've had some scheduling conflicts where Bob and I have not been able to get together to record. But we did record on Friday. We got a new video coming out. And we're going to be working on more content, hopefully more often for you guys. We do have a lot of things we want to cover. So we're going to try to start churning that out faster for you so you guys can get all the latest info on playing Black Templars. So that's all we got. Until next time, you guys have a great Sunday.